On the morning of October 11th, 1854, the auction house on Chalmers Street in Charleston witnessed something so strange that even the men inside forgot how to breathe. A woman stood on the platform, wrapped in silk rope instead of iron, as if the ordinary tools of bondage were unfit for her presence. And when the gavel finally struck, the sale price exceeded $42,000, more than a plantation, more than a manor house, more than the lives of dozens combined. In that moment, every man understood something unnatural had happened, even if none dared to speak it aloud. Charleston tried to bury the memory before it could spread. Newspapers avoided it, officials ignored it, and records quietly disappeared. The only surviving trace was a 7-word whisper hidden on page 9 of the Charleston Mercury. Unusual proceedings at Ryan's establishment, no further comment. But silence only sharpens the edges of a secret, and this secret had teeth. Why would 17 wealthy men bid with panic in their voices for one woman? What knowledge could force bankers to refuse ordinary payment channels demanding gold instead? What truth could make Charleston's most powerful families suddenly feel hunted? Tonight, on Noctivox Dark Stories, we open the door they tried to seal. We follow the trail of a woman whose mind terrified the men who claimed to own her. A woman whose silence held the power to shatter reputations, destroy fortunes, and expose the crimes carved into Charleston's foundations. Before we step deeper into this sealed room of history, tell me in the comments, what do you believe could make one enslaved woman worth more than an entire plantation? What secret could be so explosive that powerful men would pay a fortune just to keep it hidden? If stories like this, dark, buried, and fiercely suppressed, are the ones you seek, then welcome. This is Noctivox Dark Stories. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and follow me into the past, where shadows remember everything the powerful tried to erase. Charleston, in 1854, occupied a peculiar position in the American South. It liked to call itself the jewel of Southern culture, and on the surface, that wasn't a lie. Cobblestone streets glimmered after the rain. Pastel houses leaned gracefully toward the harbor, and ships moved in and out carrying cotton to Liverpool and rice to Boston as if the city breathed wealth with every tide. Church spires pierced the sky, ringing out against evenings filled with soft lantern light and palmetto trees rustling in the Atlantic breeze. Beneath this elegance, Charleston carried a truth it refused to look at directly. Nearly half the population lived in chains, working kitchens, docks, and fields, while polite society strolled past with practiced blindness. The city's real power rested in the hands of perhaps 300 families, names that echoed through every deed, charter, and business ledger. The Ravenels, the Pringles, the Haywoods, the Middletons. They dined together, married into each other's fortunes, and controlled the banks, plantations, and shipping routes that shaped every life beneath them. To a visitor, Charleston looked serene, almost theatrical in its confidence. But to those who watched closely, cracks showed beneath the polished surface. Deals were whispered behind closed shutters, accounts adjusted quietly, disappearances noted but never discussed aloud. Every great fortune rests on foundations that prefer darkness, and Charleston's wealth stood on shadows so deep most citizens never dared trace their edges. The city moved with languid grace, unaware, or pretending to be unaware, that its perfect balance depended on silence. Silence from the enslaved who served in every grand house. Silence from the merchants who managed illegal shipments after dusk. Silence from the families who believed themselves untouchable. But silence is fragile, and Charleston in 1854 was already trembling, though no one understood why. Not yet. Because in a city built on appearances, it only takes one witness, one mind, one woman who sees everything and forgets nothing, to turn a jewel into a cracked mirror and reveal what was always hiding beneath its shine. Ryan's auction house was not a place for casual buyers. It sat discreetly off Chalmers Street, marked only by a brass plaque and a pair of dark wooden doors that opened only for men considered serious in both wealth and reputation. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of polished mahogany and ink, the atmosphere calm and controlled, the kind of space where fortunes changed hands quietly without spectacle. That morning began like any other. A cook sold for a predictable price. A pair of maids followed, then a coachman with good references, then a gardener known for steady hands. The bids rose and fell with practiced rhythm, punctuated by the soft tapping of Ryan's gavel and the occasional murmur of agreement. 60 men sat in ladder-back chairs arranged in neat rows, fanning themselves with folded papers as the late morning heat crept into the room. At precisely 10:30 a.m., the rhythm cracked. A door at the rear of the auction room opened, and 2 men entered, flanking a woman whose appearance immediately commanded attention. She was tall, taller than either escort, and carried herself with a posture so composed it unsettled the men who turned to look. Her hair was braided in a way rarely seen in the South, woven with deliberate precision. Her dress, though plain, was clean and unusually well fitted, and her skin showed no scars, no marks of labor, nothing that matched the kind of property usually brought to this room. But what chilled the room was her gaze. She looked at the buyers not with fear nor confusion, but with a calm, assessing stillness, as though she were the one evaluating them, judging them, measuring what kind of men they were and what kinds of secrets they carried. The 2 escorts at her sides rested their hands on pistols, an unheard-of precaution inside an auction house. Even Ryan paused, thrown off balance, his usual confidence slipping as he unfolded the papers handed to him. His eyes scanned the document once, then again, his brow tightening as though the words defied logic. He cleared his throat, voice hesitant as he announced the opening bid. $10,000. The room fell into a silence so deep it felt physical. Fans stopped moving. Chairs creaked as men shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke. No one dared. Because whatever this woman represented, whatever truth her presence carried, it stretched beyond anything the morning's routine had prepared them for. Ryan's fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the notarized statement, the seal pressed so deeply into the wax it looked almost carved. He cleared his throat, trying to steady himself, and began to read aloud. The woman standing silently on the platform possessed knowledge of specific events, specific crimes, specific secrets. Her testimony concerns matters occurring between the years 1846 and 1853. A murmur rippled through the room as he continued, naming places that made several men stiffen in their chairs. Magnolia Plantation, the 1851 warehouse fire on East Bay Street, and an unnamed maritime incident involving insurance records that had quietly vanished years earlier. Then came the line that froze the entire room. This knowledge cannot be extracted through coercion. The subject has been conditioned to remain silent under such circumstances. Ryan paused, stunned. The buyers stared at him, but none accused him of lying. None suggested forgery. The silence was heavy, filled with the unspoken understanding that secrets were currency in Charleston, and deadly ones even more so. The bidding began not with eagerness but with dread. 10,000, Ryan repeated. 12, a voice snapped from the third row. 15, answered another before the room had time to breathe. 18, someone barked near the wall. Prices jumped like sparks from a fire, each number revealing another man desperate to keep something buried. 22, 30, 35, 40. The air grew thick as men who had come to purchase field hands found themselves competing for something far more valuable and far more dangerous than labor. 2 figures dominated the frenzy. Cornelius Ashford, a Charleston banker with too many connections to too many whispered scandals, and a stranger seated calmly near the aisle, Mr. Whitlock, an outsider whose presence no one had questioned until now. Ashford bid with visible strain, wiping sweat from his forehead. Whitlock bid with almost chilling ease, as though this were a negotiation over tobacco, not a human life. At last Ryan raised his gavel as Whitlock's voice cut through the room. $42,000. The number hung in the air like smoke, impossible, obscene, yet instantly acknowledged. Ryan swallowed hard, lifted the gavel, and brought it down with a sharp crack. Sold. Lot 47 to the gentleman. The room did not breathe as the bidding ended. Men shifted in their seats, not with triumph or disappointment, but with the uneasy recognition that something irreversible had just taken place. While most auctions ended with quick signatures and a clerk's nod, this one moved slowly, deliberately. Ryan called for verification papers. Whitlock produced sealed documents, and 2 employees carried in a locked chest containing the payment in gold, because no bank in Charleston would process a transaction this volatile on paper. The sound of coins being counted echoed through the hall like distant cannon fire. Each metallic clink reminded the buyers that this was no ordinary purchase. When the final sum was confirmed, Whitlock stepped forward and, with calm assurance, untied the silk rope from the woman's wrists. The gesture was so unexpected, so improper by Charleston standards, that several men audibly gasped. No one untied a purchase in public. No one treated a newly bought enslaved woman with formality and respect. Whitlock then offered her his arm, and the woman accepted it, placing her hand lightly at his elbow, as though she were being escorted into a ballroom rather than out of an auction house. The room watched in stunned silence as she walked with him, not behind him, not lowered or restrained, but beside him, as if she were a partner in some private arrangement none of them could comprehend. Just before reaching the door, she paused, turned slightly, and allowed her gaze to sweep across the hall, passing over each man who had bid for her, each man who feared what she knew. Her voice, when it finally broke the silence, was low, steady, and devastating. Some of you will sleep better now. Some of you will sleep far worse, and some of you will discover that knowledge once created can never be truly destroyed. It only waits for the right moment to emerge from darkness. She held the silence that followed for one final heartbeat, then walked out of Ryan's establishment forever, leaving 60 powerful men sitting in a room suddenly colder than it had been moments before. Rumors began spreading through Charleston before the afternoon sun had even started to fall. Merchants whispered in doorways, wives exchanged hurried glances over tea, and in the drawing rooms of the Ravenels, the Pringles and the Middletons, men gathered in tight circles behind closed shutters. Some spoke in rushed fragments about the Magnolia incident, others about the warehouse fire, and others refused to name their fear at all. By nightfall, 2 business deals had collapsed. One family announced a sudden trip to Europe, and more than one powerful man sent urgent letters asking whether anyone had seen Mr. Whitlock before that morning. Charleston had always relied on silence to keep its foundations steady, but Lot 47 had cracked that silence, and every man who had bid for her understood that whatever she knew was capable of ruining lives, reputations, and legacies. It was in this atmosphere of panic that lawyer Harrison Calhoun was summoned. Calhoun was a discreet practitioner, known among Charleston's elite for managing delicate problems, burying scandals, and ensuring accusations never reached a courtroom. He arrived at a private meeting composed of 7 clients, all masked behind anonymity. Their voices were calm, but their hands shook as they commissioned him to discover 3 things. Who was Lot 47? Who exactly was Mr. Whitlock? And what, in truth, had he purchased for $42,000? Calhoun accepted, though not without noticing the fear in the room, a fear powerful men rarely showed. His investigation began with the most obvious step, the notarized document Ryan had read aloud. But when Calhoun visited the courthouse, he found no entry, no record, not even an informal note in the margin of any ledger. This should have been impossible, he muttered to himself. Notarized documents required official seals, witnesses, and entries in record books designed specifically to prevent forgery. Yet the judges he questioned, 3 magistrates, each approached separately, denied ever stamping such a document, denied ever seeing the woman, denied ever speaking to Ryan. When Calhoun returned to the auction house, he discovered Ryan had shuttered the building, burned his records, and left Charleston before dawn. The neighbors claimed he departed with unusual haste, refusing to explain his destination. It was as if the entire transaction had been swallowed by the city. No paperwork, no trail, no path to follow. Calhoun realized he was no longer investigating a sale, but an erasure, and in Charleston, some transactions were better forgotten by everyone involved. Calhoun's first break came from a name mentioned only once in a shipping ledger, Thomas Burke, a courier known for carrying sensitive parcels for elite clients. After a day of questioning reluctant dock workers, Calhoun found him in a tavern near the wharf, already half drunk and unwilling to speak. But a quiet offer of coin loosened his tongue. Burke described a 3-day journey from an abandoned plantation that locals refused to go near. He arrived to find a woman sitting calmly on the porch, already dressed in the same blue dress she later wore at the auction. No chains, no fear. Her first words to him were unsettlingly deliberate. "I am merchandise with exceptional value." Burke had not escorted her from an owner's home, but from a place that had been empty for years. That alone made Calhoun's pulse quicken. He pressed further, tracing the location to what had once been the Ashton plantation, a property left to rot after a fire, and a family scandal no one in Charleston wanted to revisit. When Calhoun arrived, he found Isaiah, the old caretaker, tending to a garden that should not have survived without proper management. Isaiah recognized the woman immediately and admitted she had lived there for several weeks, always on the porch, always reading from a leather-bound book. Isaiah revealed that on the morning she left, she handed him the book and told him to burn it. But something in her eyes said it weren't right to do so, he whispered. Instead, he hid it beneath loose floorboards in the abandoned smokehouse. Calhoun followed him there, pried up the warped planks, and uncovered a volume wrapped in cloth as though it were a sacred object. Inside, the pages were filled with symbols, numerical patterns, and meticulous diagrams. English words appeared only in fragments, names, dates, places, but never in a form that revealed meaning on its own. It was a cipher, a code crafted by someone with both intelligence and discipline. As Calhoun turned to the final page, he found one fully written sentence, chilling in its clarity. This record contains testimony of events witnessed between 1846 and 1853. The key to this cipher has been transferred to one party who purchased knowledge with gold. Calhoun stared at the symbols, understanding with growing dread that this was no diary. This was a system of documentation, a ledger of secrets, a map of crimes observed over years by a woman everyone had considered invisible. She had turned a lifetime of servitude into an intelligence-gathering operation. She had created her own archive, protected it, encoded it, and ensured it would survive even if she did not. In a quiet moment of realization, Calhoun whispered what the city feared to admit. This meant the woman had not merely stumbled upon dangerous information. She had systematically documented it, protected it, and waited years for the perfect moment to convert that knowledge into value. Whitlock had not bought a servant. He had bought the key to a vault of truths capable of bringing Charleston's most powerful families to their knees. Charleston's collapse did not happen with a single revelation. It unfolded slowly, like cracks spreading beneath polished marble. The first fracture came through an anonymous packet delivered to an insurance office in Savannah. Inside were ship logs, weather reports, and sworn statements that exposed a maritime fraud scandal long buried. A group of Charleston merchants had staged a false storm incident, claimed catastrophic losses, and collected thousands in insurance payouts. The documents proved the ships had sailed in clear weather and arrived safely under different names. Someone had tracked every lie, every forged entry, every redirected crate. Weeks later, another packet surfaced, this time addressed to a northern abolitionist lawyer. It contained details of the 1851 warehouse fire on East Bay Street, a blaze long assumed accidental. But the anonymous report included coded manifests, dates, and sketches, revealing that the warehouse had been used to hide illegally imported Africans after the transatlantic trade was banned. The fire, once mourned as a tragic loss, had been deliberately set to destroy evidence, and whoever authored the documents had recorded the names of those responsible with chilling precision. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected place: a Boston newspaper. In 1856, the Liberator published a detailed testimony describing a secret meeting at Magnolia Plantation years earlier. 20 powerful men had gathered there, speaking freely in the belief that no enslaved servant would ever repeat what they heard. But a 16-year-old girl overheard their conversation, plans involving illegal shipments, bribes, and a violent cover-up. Shortly after, the girl disappeared without explanation, presumed dead, though no body was ever found. The testimony printed in Boston was too detailed, too exact, too aligned with private records for anyone to dismiss. Someone had collected the girl's account, preserved it, and sent it north years later when it would cause maximum damage. Deals collapsed. Investments were questioned, and families once considered untouchable found themselves tangled in investigations they could not escape. Charleston's gentlemen may have believed their slaves blind and deaf to their crimes. They learned too late that invisibility is not the same as absence. If you're disturbed by how these powerful men treated human beings as disposable, you're exactly who needs to hear these stories. Hit that like button and leave a comment about what you think should happen to people who commit such crimes. And yet, the revelations were not random. They followed a pattern, a deliberate release of truth calibrated to ruin reputations quietly, steadily, and without warning. Each exposure carried the unmistakable structure of a mind trained by years of observation, a mind that had learned how Charleston's power worked and where to strike so the damage would spread like rot behind a painted wall. The city had spent decades believing its secrets safe, but Lot 47 had transformed knowledge into a weapon sharper than any blade. Decades after the auction, long after Charleston tried to seal its past beneath layers of denial, a letter surfaced in the estate of Mr. Whitlock, a letter written in a careful, disciplined hand. It revealed that the woman known only as Lot 47 had negotiated the terms of her own sale with astonishing precision. She demanded that the buyer be someone with no connection to Charleston's elite, someone immune to their threats and influence. She required that the proceeds of the transaction be used to secure her freedom and to support abolitionist networks operating quietly along the eastern seaboard. And she insisted that the information she possessed be released not chaotically, not in anger, but strategically, at moments when it would dismantle systems rather than simply expose individual men. That letter also carried the truth Charleston never wanted spoken aloud. Her name, Eliza Rothman. Born in the city in 1824, she came into the world positioned between two identities. Her mother, an enslaved woman with quiet intelligence and secret education, and her father, a Jewish merchant who refused to acknowledge her publicly, yet could not fully sever his connection to her. From her mother, she learned to read and write in stolen hours at night, tracing letters in ash and whispering lessons that could have cost them both their lives. From the shadows of her father's world, she absorbed numbers, ledgers, coded marks in account books, and the quiet language of transactions that powerful men never imagined she understood. By adolescence, Eliza possessed something rare, an eidetic memory sharp enough to retain conversations verbatim and numerical sequences without effort. She began constructing her cipher not as a hobby, but as a means of survival. She blended fragments of Hebrew script she glimpsed in her father's texts with the numerical shorthand she saw clerks use in shipping offices. Over the years, she filled small, hidden notebooks with observations, conversations overheard, letters glimpsed, coded ledgers interpreted, the layout of plantations, the structure of debts, and the quiet crimes committed by men who believed she was invisible. She hid these notebooks under floorboards, behind loose bricks, in abandoned smokehouses and closed-up attics, creating a network of truths far stronger than any single document could have contained. The most intimate glimpse into her mind came from a line found within one overwritten page of the cipher book, faint but unmistakably hers. This work is simply necessary, like removing infection from a wound. One does not celebrate the removal, one simply removes it and moves forward. It was not vengeance she sought, not spectacle, but correction, a restoration of truth in a world built on carefully maintained lies. When you read the pieces of her life together, you begin to see Eliza not as an accidental witness, but as a strategist born from silence. A woman who understood that power depended not just on violence, but on information, concealment, and control. She recognized early that Charleston's elite relied on the assumption that those beneath them did not see, did not think, did not remember. Eliza shattered that illusion quietly, deliberately, and with a discipline forged in fear and sharpened by brilliance. She did not simply collect secrets. She curated them, coded them, and waited for the single moment when knowledge could be transformed into liberation, for herself and for others whose names history never recorded, but whose lives she protected from the shadows. Eliza's brilliance didn't exist in isolation, and the deeper you look into Charleston's history, the more clearly you see the quiet network that sustained her. Harriet, an elderly woman interviewed decades later by abolitionist scholars, described her as the most dangerous person I ever met, who appeared docile. Harriet explained that Eliza understood a truth many enslaved women carried like a hidden blade. Invisibility is the greatest weapon. In the grand houses of Charleston, house servants moved silently behind their owners, laying tables, cleaning chambers, tending fires, ignored, underestimated, dismissed. And because they were unseen, they saw everything. Through whispered conversations in kitchens and over washing lines, a network took shape, not formally organized but instinctively connected. House servants warned one another about violent masters, shared information about secret meetings, and kept track of debts, affairs, shipments, and lies. They passed notes disguised as grocery lists, memorized overheard letters, and stitched coded messages into garment hems. Memory became their shield, their currency, and their quiet rebellion. In this web of hidden observers, Eliza emerged as the central node, the one who could write, who could analyze, who could turn fragments into patterns and patterns into devastating truth. After securing her freedom, the money from her sale did not vanish into private comfort. According to Whitlock's preserved receipts, a portion funded schools for freed people along the coast, small institutions that taught reading, writing, and arithmetic to those who had long been denied such tools. Another portion was redirected into legal funds supporting abolitionist attorneys who defended escaped slaves in northern courts. And some of it purchased parcels of land in rural regions, quietly transferred to families who had fled bondage and needed a place to begin again. Eliza understood that knowledge alone could expose corruption, but knowledge paired with opportunity could dismantle it. She had spent her life gathering truth, but once free, she turned her focus toward building futures for others who would never know her name. Her impact was not just in what she revealed, but in the foundations she laid for those who would walk after her. Charleston believed it had purchased silence that day in October. What it really financed was the architecture of its own destruction. When researchers in 2019 scanned Eliza's cipher book with modern imaging tools, they expected to uncover hidden numbers, erased symbols, technical details. What they didn't expect was the discovery of her private, overwritten memoir, lines she had written only for herself, and then buried beneath coded layers to protect her own mind from exposure. These were not reports of crimes or conspiracies. These were the thoughts of a woman who lived every day knowing she carried enough truth to get herself killed. One passage, dated March 1851, revealed the crushing psychological weight she bore. "I have carried this knowledge for 5 years now. The weight becomes crushing at times. I know things that could destroy families, end businesses, send men to prison, and I can do nothing with this knowledge except preserve it and wait. Some nights I fear I will die before the moment arrives, and everything I witnessed will vanish with me." Her words move slowly, as if she is holding her breath between each line. The fear isn't just for her life. It's for the possibility that her suffering, her memory, her labor might mean nothing in the end. But just pages later, the tone shifts. She discovers something deeper, something dangerously empowering. They believe they can do anything as long as no one speaks of it. They believe silence equals consent. They believe invisibility equals non-existence. They believe power grants immunity from consequence. I will teach them otherwise. It is the closest thing we have to the moment she decided she would not merely survive, she would strike. Her philosophy is simple but devastating. Power depends on two illusions, the illusion that no one is watching and the illusion that no one will remember. Eliza turned both illusions to dust. She weaponized observation. She weaponized memory. She understood something about human psychology that even the most educated men around her failed to see, that guilt is a leash, and fear is the hand that holds it. A guilty man will pay any price to keep the truth buried. An entire city will tremble if a single servant remembers too much. And here's the haunting part. Her insight isn't locked in the 1850s. It echoes in corporate offices, political backrooms, boardrooms, and digital spaces today, whenever a powerful person counts on silence to protect them, whenever they assume that those beneath them do not see, do not hear, do not remember. Eliza's philosophy still applies. Truth waits, memory waits, and the moment the right voice chooses to speak, even the strongest empire can crack. In her hidden memoir, Eliza wasn't just documenting resistance, she was defining it. She was showing us that some revolutions happen not with fire or rebellion, but with observation, with patience, with the quiet certainty that no system built on lies can endure forever when even one person chooses to witness the truth. When Eliza's story resurfaced in the 20th century, it didn't return quietly. It burst through the floorboards of history, through biographies like The Witness, through exhibitions on hidden resistance, through college halls renamed in her honor. Civil rights leaders quoted her strategy, historians debated her morality, and ordinary people, reading her words more than a century after her death, felt something sharp and familiar. The realization that the oppressed have always seen more than the powerful believed. That silence is not ignorance, it is the gathering of ammunition. What should we take from her story today? That resistance is not always loud, dramatic, or swift. Sometimes it is patient, forensic, methodical. Sometimes it exists in the quiet work of watching, listening, remembering. Sometimes it takes decades before truth gets its moment in the sun, but when it does, it tears down walls that once looked indestructible. Knowledge outlives the people who weaponize it. Memory outlives the systems built to suppress it. She stood on that auction platform in October of 1854, silent and composed, while men bid frantically for what she knew. And in that silence, she proved something they could never accept, that the mind they tried to erase was worth more than land, more than buildings, more than all the blood money stacked in that room. They believed enslaved people were invisible. They believed their crimes would never echo beyond those walls. They believed silence would protect them forever.